The world, for me, had always been the size of Harmony Creek. It was measured in the length of the walk from our little white house to the general store, in the number of pews at St. Jude's, and in the predictable cadence of my mother's breathing as she slept in the room next to mine. My life was a well-kept garden, every day planted neatly next to the one before. Sunday was the cornerstone of it all. The air in St. Jude's smelled of lemon polish and old paper, a scent I associated with peace. That was the day I first saw her, a tear in the serene fabric of my world. She was sitting, slouching, really in the last pew, a spot usually reserved for latecomers or the particularly penitent. But she looked neither late nor sorry. She looked like a storm cloud that had wandered indoors by mistake. While the rest of us wore our Sunday best, pastel dresses and neatly pressed slacks, she had on a black leather jacket, frayed at the elbows, and jeans with a small, intentional rip at one knee. Her hair was the color of a raven's wing, cut short and messy, and a single silver hoop glinted in her ear. She was a slash of stark black ink on a pale, watercolored page. My mother, beside me, made a small, tight sound of disapproval. I knew without looking her lips would be pressed into a thin line. Everyone in town knew of Autumn Monroe. Her family was old money, one of the town's founding names, but she was the wild branch on a carefully pruned tree. Her reputation preceded her like a shadow, loud music blaring from her beat-up muscle car, rumors of parties that lasted till dawn, a general air of not caring what anyone thought. I tried to focus on Pastor Michael's sermon, on the familiar words about grace and forgiveness, but my eyes kept straying. I could feel her gaze on me, not a casual glance, but a steady, unblinking inspection that made the back of my neck grow warm. I suddenly felt too big, too clumsy in my pale yellow dress, my blonde hair pulled back in a simple, practical braid. I was everything she was not: quiet, compliant, easy to overlook. When the service ended and the organ struck the recessional hymn, relief washed over me. We filed out, my mother pausing to chat with Mrs. Gable about the upcoming bake sale. I stood a few feet away, clutching my Bible to my chest like a shield, waiting. Then she was there, standing right in front of me. Up close, she was even more striking. Her eyes were a deep, smoky gray, lined with dark pencil that made them look both ancient and knowing. A faint scent of cinnamon and cloves clung to her. Ellie, right? Her voice was lower than I expected, a little rough around the edges. I could only nod. My own voice was stuck somewhere in my throat. A small smile tugged at her lips, not friendly, exactly, but amused, like she held a secret I didn't. I've seen you around. You're always looking at the ground. Afraid you'll trip? My face flushed. No, I'm not. I fumbled for words, my mind blank. You're not what? She pressed, her gaze unwavering. Not the type to stir things up? She leaned in a little, and my world shrank to the space between us. Sometimes a place like this needs to be stirred. She held out her phone, palm up, not for a handshake but for my number. Text me. I'll reach out. It wasn't a question. It was a command wrapped in a soft tone. I felt my mother's eyes on us from across the narthex, sharp and questioning. Panic warred with a strange, unfamiliar flicker of defiance in my chest. My fingers, clumsy and unsteady, typed my number into her phone. There, she said, pulling the device back. Good girl. She winked, a bold gesture that stole my breath. Then, as quickly as she'd appeared, she was gone, pushing through the heavy oak doors into the bright Sunday sun, leaving me standing in the church's stillness, my heart thudding wildly against my ribs. The peace of my ordered life never returned. It was as if autumn had left a crack in its foundation, and now, unsettling things seeped in. The first text came that afternoon, a jarring buzz in our quiet living room. It was just a photo, no words, of a dandelion pushing through a crack in the pavement. A simple weed. I stared at it for a long time, wondering what it meant. Her messages continued, sporadic and strange. A late-night line from a song I'd never heard. The sky is a bruised purple. A photo of the moon, impossibly large and close, taken from somewhere I didn't recognize. Each was a small, foreign thing dropped into my world. They demanded nothing, yet filled my thoughts. I never replied. Replying felt like opening a door I knew I should keep locked. But I didn't delete them either. They lived in my phone, a secret archive of her strange, uninvited world. One afternoon, while helping my mother prune rose bushes, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from her view. It was a photo of Autumn's hand, palm up, holding a tiny, perfect bird's egg, faint blue against her skin. Below it, one word: found. Who is that, dear? My mother asked, her voice sharp with curiosity as she snipped a dead bloom. You've been glued to that phone lately. Just a message from the church group? I lied. The words felt thick and clumsy. I didn't lie to my mother, not ever, in our carefully built life. Guilt soured in my stomach. That evening, I tried to read in my room, but the pages were just black marks. The house's quiet felt different now, not peaceful, but empty.
My phone buzzed again.
This time, a question. What do you do for fun in this town, St. Ellie? The nickname made my cheeks burn. Annoyance surged. Who was she to mock the life I lived? For the first time, I typed a reply, my fingers moving on their own. I read. I hail my mother. I go to church. Her response came instantly. That's not fun. That's a waiting room. I didn't know what to say. A waiting room for what? My life wasn't a pause, it was my life. But as I sat in the pale lamplight, surrounded by my childhood bedroom's floral wallpaper, her words echoed. For the first time, the walls felt closer, the quiet louder. I was waiting, I realized. I just didn't know for what. A few days later, dusk painted Harmony Creek in soft pink and orange. My phone buzzed with a new message. Front door. 5 minutes. No room for argument. A knot of anxiety, and something else I refused to name, tightened in my stomach. I told my mother I was going for a walk, another small lie that pricked my conscience. When I stepped onto the porch, Autumn's car rumbled to a stop at the curb. Old, dark green, loud, unapologetic. It looked like it held stories. Autumn leaned over and pushed the passenger door open. Get in, St. Ellie, she said, her voice carrying in the quiet evening. The sermon's over. My mind screamed to go back inside, to lock the door and hide in my room. But my feet carried me down the steps and into the car. The interior smelled of leather, gasoline, and that faint cinnamon. The seat was cracked, and music thrummed from the speakers, vibrating through the floor. It was a world away from my mother's clean, quiet sedan. She didn't say where we were going. She just drove, hands steady on the wheel, navigating our town's familiar streets before turning onto a winding back road I'd only seen from a distance. Trees loomed tall, their branches forming a canopy over the pavement. The world outside blurred into green and gray. She drove faster than my father ever had, and a sharp, terrifying thrill shot through me. We ended at Miller's Ridge, a lookout point, legendary among teens, that I'd only heard mentioned in disapproving whispers. The engine cut out, and silence crashed over us, broken only by crickets. Below, Harmony Creek was a scatter of tiny lights, a miniature version of the world I knew. It looked so small from up here. See, Autumn said softly, her voice losing its usual mockery. Just a bunch of little boxes full of people sleeping. We sat in silence for a long time. I watched her profile in the dashboard's dim glow, her face's hard lines softened in the dark. She wasn't looking at the town. She was staring at the sky, at the vast, star-dusted dark. Up here, she murmured, more to herself than me, you can almost forget you're in one of them. I had no words. I could only watch the distant lights and feel the solid, predictable ground of my life shift beneath me. This was a trespass, not just on forbidden land, but into a new way of seeing the world.
It was terrifying.
And it was intoxicating. The drives became a semi-regular thing. No plans, just a text, a summons, and me, making excuses, the lies growing easier each time. We rarely went far. Sometimes we sat by the creek, skipping stones across dark water. Sometimes we went to the all-night highway diner for bitter, burnt coffee. In those quiet moments, I started to see past the town's rebellious caricature of her. One evening, we parked near old, abandoned railway tracks, the engine idling softly. Autumn traced patterns in the dashboard's dust, quiet. My grandfather built half Main Street's buildings, she said suddenly, her voice flat. The Monroe name's supposed to mean something here, stability, piety. She laughed, short and humorless. My dad thinks dragging me to church enough will make it stick. Like I'm mud, he can shape. It was the first time she'd shared something of herself unasked. I pictured her in a pew, a wild thing in a cage, and understood. Her defiance wasn't a show. It was a defense. Why did you talk to me? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. That day in church. She turned to me, her gray eyes catching the dim light. Because you looked like you were suffocating, she said simply. And I know what that feels like. The words hung between us, honest, sharp.
She saw me.
Not just the quiet girl in the yellow dress, but the part underneath. She saw the cage I hadn't even realized I was in. She turned off the engine, plunging us into deeper silence. She stared at the rusted tracks disappearing into darkness, not at me. Everyone in this town thinks they have me figured out, she said low. The bad girl. The disappointment. They like it that way. It's simple. It fits. She finally met my gaze. They think they have you figured out, too. The good girl. The saint. Does that fit, Ellie? I had no answer. For 24 years, I'd believed it did. I'd worn the label like a second skin. But sitting here in the dark with her, it felt tight, restrictive, like a dress I'd outgrown long ago. My life split in two. There was the before, muted colors, predictable rhythms. The after, vibrant, chaotic, mapped by late-night drives and cryptic texts. My center of gravity shifted, away from home and church, toward her. Sunday sermons felt hollow. Hymns sounded off-key. While Pastor Michael spoke of devotion, I thought of cinnamon and leather in Autumn's car. While pruning roses with my mother, I stared at pavement cracks, remembering the dandelion photo. She was an echo in every quiet moment, a shadow over every familiar routine. Guilt followed me everywhere. It sat heavy at family dinners, whispered in my ear during prayers. I lived in deception, small omissions, outright lies piling like stones, building a wall between who everyone thought I was and who I was becoming. But underneath the guilt, something new grew. Anticipation. My phone's buzz sent a jolt sharper than caffeine. The sight of her car turning onto my street made my heart race. I craved the disruption she brought, the way she made the world feel bigger, brighter. One afternoon, I shelved books at the town library, my sanctuary, a place of quiet order. But as I ran my fingers over worn classics, I found myself searching for the poets she'd quoted. I checked one out, hiding it at the bottom of my bag like contraband. That night, in my room, I read the words about darkness and beauty, about light in broken things. They made no logical sense, but I felt them. They felt like her. I was learning a new language, one without politeness or propriety. It was the language of bruised purple skies and perfect, fragile things found in dirt. My neat world was growing messy, complicated. And for the first time, I felt truly awake. It happened on a Tuesday night. The air was thick and humid, promising a thunderstorm that hadn't broken. We'd driven to Blackwood Forest's edge, where the town's neat grid dissolved into wildness. We didn't talk much, just listened to cicadas and wind rustling leaves. The car's atmosphere was different that night, heavy, charged with unspoken things. I was acutely aware of the small space between us, of the way her fingers tapped an erratic rhythm on the steering wheel. She killed the engine, and silence pulled the air from the car. I turned to speak, to break the tension, but the words died when I saw her face. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced by raw, unguarded intensity. She leaned across the console, slow, deliberate. No aggression, just quiet inevitability. My mind went blank. Every rule, every mother's warning, every verse on propriety I'd memorized, they vanished into the humid night. Her lips met mine. It wasn't fierce. It was gentle, a soft, questioning pressure. Over in a second, brief enough to doubt, yet real. Its warmth lingered on my skin. Then panic hit. Cold, violent, extinguishing everything else. This was wrong. A line I'd never meant to cross, a door I shouldn't have opened. My already fractured world shattered into pieces. I pushed back, my hands hitting her shoulders harder than I intended. Surprise flashed in her eyes, then something like hurt, before I scrambled for the door handle. "Ellie," she started, her voice rough. But I was already out, my feet hitting gravel clumsily. I didn't look back. I ran down the dark, tree-lined road, my ragged breaths filling my ears. I ran from her, from the car, from the unspoken question in her closeness, and the terrifying answer blooming in my heart. The next 2 days were a blur of self-imposed exile. I left the house only for work, moving like I was in a fog. I silenced my phone, terrified of her name on the screen. The silence was a hollow ache. Every room felt like a cage. My mother watched me with worried eyes, asking if I was ill. I just nodded, unable to lie more than that. Sleep offered no escape. My thoughts cycled relentlessly, guilt, confusion, shame heavy as a physical weight. I replayed the car moment 1,000 times, the brief warmth, the icy panic. I'd run. I'd hurt her. I'd acted like a scared child. That night, I had a vivid dream, one that clung to me after waking. I stood on Miller's Ridge's cliff edge. The ground crumbled, and I fell, plummeting into vast, silent darkness. No fear, only surrender. Wind rushed past, and I closed my eyes, waiting for impact. It never came. Gentle hands caught me, stopping my fall. I couldn't see who it was, but I knew the touch, the scent of cinnamon and cloves. I wasn't pulled back to the cliff. I was just held, suspended in darkness, safe. I woke gasping, my heart pounding. The room was dark, but the dream's feeling remained. It wasn't the fall I remembered, it was being caught. Profound, unconditional safety in chaos. The dream didn't solve anything. Guilt and confusion still tangled inside me. But it shifted something fundamental. I'd feared the fall, the loss of my rigid life. Now, I wondered if the fall wasn't the end. Maybe someone waited to catch me. The text came on the third day. I turned my phone back on. Silence had grown more unbearable than confrontation. My hands shook as I read 2 words. Are you okay? No anger, no accusation, no teasing nickname, just quiet concern. It broke through my panic wall. I stared at it for an hour before typing 1 word. Yes. A few hours later, the park. By the fountain. Tomorrow at 3? A neutral space, public, safe. Fear still lived in me, but the dream's memory gave me a sliver of courage. Okay. The next day, I saw her on a bench near the stone fountain before she saw me. No leather jacket, just a simple gray sweater, her dark hair brushed back. She looked smaller, less intimidating, watching the water with an unreadable expression. I sat at the bench's other end, leaving space. We didn't speak for a long time, just listened to the fountain's splash and distant children's laughter. Not awkward, patient. She let me set the terms. I'm sorry, I whispered, barely audible. For running. She turned to me, her gray eyes clear and serious. Don't be, she said softly. You were scared. I get it. She paused. I shouldn't have moved too fast. Her understanding soothed my raw nerves. I'd expected anger, mockery, but she gave only acceptance. I don't know what I'm doing, I confessed, staring at my twisted hands. Neither do I, Ellie, she said, using my real name, no saint, and it felt like a gift. But maybe, she added, a small, hesitant smile returning. We could figure it out. Slowly. She didn't move closer, didn't try to touch me. She just sat there, offering space and time. In that sunlit park, surrounded by ordinary afternoon sounds, my last of panic faded. In its place grew a fragile, tentative hope. That night, my mother found my hidden poets book. I came home to her standing in my room, the book open on my bed, her face pale. What is this? She asked, her voice tight, flipping through pages marked with my notes, lines that felt like autumn. Since when do you read this? I froze. My throat went dry. It's just poetry, I said, but my voice wavered. Just poetry? She held up a page where I'd written bruised purple sky in the margin. You've been lying to me, Ellie. About the church group, about walks. What is this really about? Tears stung my eyes. I can't explain, I said, quiet. Not yet. She closed the book, her hands trembling. I just want you to be safe, she said, her voice breaking. This town, it's small. It doesn't forgive. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged her, tight, like I was clinging to the old life even as I reached for the new. A week later, Autumn invited me to her apartment, a second-floor unit in an old Victorian on town's edge, ivy creeping up its walls. The invitation felt like crossing a threshold into her world, and I was terrified. But her patience in the park pushed me forward. Stepping inside, I understood her better than all our drives had. It was a chaotic masterpiece. Books stacked in precarious towers, half-finished canvases propped against walls, air thick with turpentine, coffee, and dust. Messy, vibrant, her. Unlike my mother's museum of order, this place felt alive. She handed me a mug of tea, put on quiet instrumental music, filling the space without demanding attention. We didn't talk about what we were, or the kiss. We talked about her paintings, a swirl of dark blues and purples that looked like Miller's Ridge's night sky. She explained the colors, her voice soft with passion, and I saw the world through her eyes, full of hidden beauty, stark contrasts, light and darkness. As afternoon faded to evening, she sat in a worn armchair, I on the floor beside a stack of books. The space between us hummed with peace. The town, my mother, the church, all melted away. There was only this room, this music, her. She looked at me, her eyes holding unspoken things. No question, just an invitation, silent. I moved to the rug in front of her chair. She didn't move, just watched. This was my choice, my pace. I rested my hand on her knee, over her worn jeans. Her hand came to rest gently on top of mine. Our closeness wasn't a storm. It was a quiet tide, turning inevitable, a silent agreement, a language without words. In her chaotic, beautiful world, I stopped fighting the current. I let it pull me, and it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like coming home. We built a life in the margins, between my library shifts and her painting hours, in her apartment's hush and her car's darkness. Our relationship was a secret garden, hidden behind a high wall, beautiful, fragile, ours alone. The world saw no change in me. I was still Ellie, the quiet girl who helped her mother, attended church, returned library books on time. But inside, I was being remade. Autumn taught me to exist not in defiance of my world, but in spite of it. Small gestures became monumental, a shared glance across the general store's aisle, holding an entire conversation. Her hand brushing mine on a deserted night street, sending a jolt stronger than any sermon. We went to a movie theater in the next town, dark, anonymous, and she took my hand. I didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined, a simple, revolutionary act that made my heart beat fierce and triumphant. Fear lingered, a low hum. I'd drop her hand if I saw Mrs. Gable from the bake sale, shame bitter in my mouth. I'd lie about study groups or late shifts, tiny betrayals, even as they protected the truest part of me. Autumn seemed fearless, but I saw her mask slip, her jaw tightening when her father's car passed, her silence when memories pulled her away. We navigated a world that had no space for us, together. The delicate balance of our secret was always fragile. I knew that, but I'd let myself believe we could keep it forever. The crack widened on a Thursday evening. I'd spent the afternoon at Autumn's, losing track of time debating a novel I'd loaned her. I rushed home as my mother set dinner, my cheeks flushed from cold and hurry. "You were out late," she said, back to me. Her voice was flat, sharp, new. "The library closed hours ago." "I went for a walk," I stammered. The lie felt paper-thin. She turned slowly, her blue eyes, so like mine, fixed on me, intense. "A walk? For 3 hours? Ellie, you've been distant. Always somewhere else." She paused, sweeping her gaze over me like she was seeing me for the first time in months. "You're different. Is there someone? Someone you're not telling me about?" The word someone hung heavy. In her world, someone was a nice boy from a good family. My someone was so far outside her imagination it was unthinkable. Yet her question hit too close. "No, Mom," I whispered. "I'm just tired." We both knew it was a lie. Dinner was silent, suffocating. Every fork scrape sounded like an accusation. I felt her watching, trying to solve the puzzle of her changing daughter. That night, I texted Autumn, panicked. "My mom knows something's wrong. She's asking questions." Her reply was instant. "Breathe, Ellie. Just breathe." But I couldn't. The walls of my deception closed in. Fear, held back for months, rushed over me, cold and overwhelming. Our secret garden wasn't a fortress. It was a greenhouse, thin glass walls, and my mother stood outside with a stone. My mother's suspicion pressed down on me, suffocating. I grew jumpy, withdrawn, seeing judgment in every look. I made excuses not to see Autumn. Busy. Need to help Mom. Distance grew, a cold chasm I dug. Finally, Autumn called. Not a text, a call. Miller's Ridge, she said, her voice lacking warmth. Tonight. We need to talk. The car ride was silent, strained. She gripped the wheel till her knuckles whitened. At the lookout, she cut the engine and turned to me, her face grim in the dashboard glow. This isn't working, Ellie, she said, raw. You're terrified. You look like a ghost. She took a shaky breath. You don't have to do this. Go back. Be the good daughter, the quiet girl. Be safe. I'll disappear. I'm good at it. An exit. A clean break. She offered my old life back, the safety of my cage. Every instinct screamed to take it. Easy. A few painful weeks, then back to familiar rhythms. I looked at Harmony Creek's tiny lights below, those neat boxes she'd pointed out. I could go back. Close the door. Pretend none of this happened. Pretend I'd never tasted the open sky. But the thought was unbearable. It was the thought of suffocating. I thought of the dandelion, the bruised purple sky, the dream of being caught. Life with her was terrifying, uncertain, but real. My old life was a waiting room. Slowly, I shook my head. No, I whispered. Her face didn't change. Are you sure? This won't get easier. Probably harder. I know, I said, my voice strengthening. I met her gaze, clear, certain for the first time in days. I don't want easy. I want you. Tension left her shoulders. She exhaled, long and shaky. No smile, but her eyes softened. She reached across the console, palm up, on the seat between us. An offering. I placed my hand in hers. Her fingers closed around mine, firm, grounding. That night, there were no more questions, only answers in the quiet space above the sleeping town. I'd made my choice. The choice didn't fix everything. My mother still watched me, worry thick in our small house. Harmony Creek was still small, narrow-minded. The path ahead was unclear. But something in me settled. The war between my two selves ended. A few weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning, Autumn pulled up to my curb. I met her on the porch, a small overnight bag in hand. My mother watched from the window, confused, disapproving. I'd told her I was on a church youth retreat, a bold lie, but the best I could do. Ready? Autumn asked, her eyes sparkling with familiar mischief I hadn't seen in weeks. Ready, I said. The word felt true. We didn't go to our usual spots. She turned onto the highway, west away from town. Windows down, wind whipping my hair, carrying pine and asphalt. Music blared, a driving, hopeful beat. Where are we going? I yelled over the noise. She grinned, eyes on the road. Don't know. Thought we'd drive till we find a road we've never seen. Perfect. I leaned back, watching familiar landmarks shrink in the rearview mirror. The girl I'd been, afraid of tripping on pavement, felt like a stranger, a character from an old story. I didn't know our future. I didn't know if we'd ever live beyond stolen moments and secrets. Fear of the unknown sat in the back seat, quiet. But for the first time, it was overshadowed by possibility, bright, expansive, thrilling. I reached over and touched her arm. She glanced at me, smile softening, and covered my hand with hers. Ahead, the road stretched, gray, empty, leading to an open horizon. We drove into the unknown, together. And my real journey, I knew, had only just begun.